Welcome to this special edition of School Choice Report. It's a special edition because our guest today is one of my personal heroes, former Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos. Betsy, thanks so much for being with me today.
I'm thrilled to be with you, Charles. Thanks.
Now, you're traveling the country at the moment, but the last time you and I spoke, Betsy, I had the pleasure of welcoming you to Scranton, Pennsylvania, hometown of President Biden. Some of the folks that you were traveling with mentioned how surprised they were to be on the Joseph R. Biden Jr. Expressway. Now, this is the School Choice Report. We'll get to school choice in a minute. But that night in Scranton, you gave an excellent speech on another topic that relates to your record as Secretary of Education, and I know is very important to you. So tell our listeners, Betsy, what were you doing in Scranton?
Well, Charles, we were there to urge protection of Title IX and really basically taking Title IX back for all the women and young women that it was intended for originally over 50 years ago. So that bus tour has continued all around the country, and it's really bringing attention to a rule that the Biden administration has put forward, which would essentially gut the purpose of Title IX by allowing biological males to be competing on and with and against women, and also allow them into all of their personal spaces. So this is a tour to bring attention to that and urge putting a stop to this proposed rule.
Well, one of the things that most struck me that night was there was a group of people from across the political spectrum, all the folks who were speaking alongside you. You had people who believed all sorts of things on all sorts of issues, but they came together around that issue, around the issue of protecting Title IX. And I happen to think that's one of the things that also can be happening and maybe is happening in our country on the issue that this show is dedicated to, school choice, or as you call it in your recent book, education freedom. And one of the reasons why you're such a hero of mine is that you've been a crusader for this cause for decades. Why? Where does your passion come from?
Well, it comes from true love of every child and a belief in their potential, of the potential of every individual child. And it really started when my oldest of four children started school. And I began to realize how Dick and I could make decisions for our son and his successive siblings that would be the right thing for each of them. But there were all too many families that didn't have that kind of opportunity and couldn't make those kind of choices because they simply don't have the resources. So that's been 35 years of advocating for and building on the efforts of many that had started all those years ago as well, to bring the policies that will support families making those choices to every state in the country.
Now, 35 years of work. Last time I checked, 14, I think, states where universal education freedom now exists. Most recently, my good friends in Louisiana. I mean, how do you feel? Do you feel like your efforts are starting to pay off?
Well, I feel very excited about it. I feel very thankful for all of those who've continued to do the hard work in each of those states, and in many cases, politicians casting tough votes. At least they think they're tough. But I'm one that is always looking sort of for the next thing that needs to happen. And so it's great that these policies have passed. Now I'm just longing to see the kind of creative solutions start to take root and families have the kind of choices and options that I think they really need to have. Because as we both know, Charles, the system and the model that so many kids have been forced to be a part of for decades is really a broken model for so many of them. And so I think that we're going to see a lot of exciting new opportunities in the whole field of education as a result of these policies.
Beautiful. And, I'm a believer in that. My wife and I are school founders. As you know, our kids go to a school similar to where your grandkids go. You've met some of the network of Black pastors that we're working with here in Pennsylvania to turn Sunday school classrooms into learning centers. But of course, that gets a lot easier if you get the policy. And I do want to ask you about policy for a second. as you know, my state, Pennsylvania, we're in a little bit of a race right now with our good friends in Texas, which, I say is a state, they say is another country. That's another discussion. But the question is, which of our states is going to be the next to create education savings accounts, or ESAs, which you wrote about in your book. Now, I do want to ask you about Pennsylvania, but first, you were recently part of a great victory in Texas that will hugely aid the cause of education freedom there. Can you tell our listeners about it?
Well, it's very exciting what's happened in Texas. And, Governor Abbott, for a number of years, this issue was not particularly high on his list. But it was interesting. I think his observation and experiences in navigating through COVID really opened his eyes to how little control families actually had over their kids' education futures. And so he became a real advocate for education freedom in a way he had never done before. But he was thwarted by a couple of dozen of his state legislators who continued to just play the tune of the teachers union and support a system, the status quo, really refusing to let any families the opportunity to choose something different. So Governor Abbott, went to bat for challengers to those individuals, those legislators, and many of those challengers won in the first round of the primary, and then more recently, a number of those that had to advance to the runoff also won. So the result being that, at least on paper, he has the votes now to be able to get a major education savings account provision passed in Texas. So I'm excited to see if Pennsylvania or Texas are going to be the next ones to do it.
Well, and either way, as you know, it's one of the top 5 biggest states in our country to be the next domino to fall, and it's awesome. And now, let's talk about the press for a second, Betsy. I have to ask you a quick follow-up about that, because what's often said about you, about me, about a lot of people who are crusaders for education freedom is, we're political hacks, right? You have been in the leadership of the Republican Party in Michigan, where you and your husband live. Your husband ran for governor. But one of the things you did mention is the political party of those people that you helped kick out of office in Texas. What political party were those lawmakers who were in league with the teachers union?
Yeah, well, all of them were Republicans.
Oh, wait. So Betsy DeVos went against Republicans and for kids.
In favor of kids, in favor of families, in favor of their futures. And I think this move is sending a loud message to state legislators in other states as well. Governor Kim Reynolds in Iowa sort of set the stage, and she courageously supported a number of legislators in primaries the session before. And so other governors have taken note, and I think are seeing the benefit and the wisdom of really standing with families and kids, and against those who are standing in the schoolhouse door, literally keeping kids in schools that are not working for them.
Amen. And I'm one of those people. I think courage is contagious. I think Governor Reynolds' courage was contagious. I think Governor Abbott picked up some of it. And I also think you and Dick's courage is contagious. And people around the country are now following in your footsteps. And that's how some of these victories are happening. Now, with that said, I'm really thankful for what you and your friends and your husband did in Texas. But my money is still on Pennsylvania. And as thankful as I am for all these red states that are passing education freedom, my own personal belief, Betsy, is it is really going to change the complexion of this issue nationally to have a Democratic governor sign an ESA bill. And I'm also convinced it's a matter of when and not if.
Absolutely.
Friends in Pennsylvania here win that victory. So given all you've invested in this, how would you feel, or how, in my mind, how will you feel when you watch the first Democrat sign a bill like that?
I couldn't agree with you more, Charles, that it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And I think Pennsylvania is the perfect state for that to happen in, and it should happen there. You have had such champions in the state of Pennsylvania for so many years, trying every different angle. And the fact that you are so close today and continuing to build momentum, I think it would be a game changer for education writ large when that happens, because other Democrats in leading states and other, across the country are going to see how beneficial this is ultimately for everyone in their state. And I've maintained the same thing about members of Congress. It will only take one or two courageous ones to take that step away from being totally under the thumb of the teachers union, and they will be rewarded for that ultimately, I believe.
Amen. Well said. Now, there's one of those champions, Betsy, who you know personally. She's the president of our Senate in Pennsylvania, Kim Ward. As you know, she's a mighty warrior leading the way in the fight to make all that happen in Pennsylvania. In fact, she's fighting right now, and this is a really busy summer for our legislature. Actually, she reminds me of you. What would you like her to know? She might see this podcast. What would you like her to know as she's fighting this fight?
Well, Kim should know that there are a lot of people standing shoulder to shoulder with her, even if they're not there in person, and that she is doing the right and courageous thing, and she should be encouraged, and she should be emboldened. And if she needs to have encouragement, she need only raise her hand and reach out. And I will be very happy to talk with her at any time to help with courage there. And I know you will, and others will. But she has to be taking courage from what she is seeing happen in other states. And I think more and more legislators are being emboldened by the momentum that has built around this issue and around really providing families opportunity.
Yeah. And, if there's one thing I'll say about Pennsylvania Senate President Kim Ward, she doesn't lack for courage. But I think you're right that the way these lawmakers in other states are standing up really sends an important signal. In fact, some of the deciding votes in places like Louisiana, Missouri, I'm sure you saw some of the videos just as I did, were Democratic lawmakers. There was the one from Missouri that was a tearjerker. There were others in Georgia and other states. You saw them. I think breaking this partisan logjam, because I can still remember, I know you can too, when education freedom was a bipartisan issue until it wasn't. And that affected your confirmation hearing. I'm sure I don't need to remind you. But I think we're going to live to see the day when finally this is a bipartisan issue again. And I think where you'll see it has much better support in both parties, because it didn't used to have as much support in the Republican Party as it does today. And
absolutely.
You're doing something about that.
No, absolutely. Success breeds success. And, as more and more families exercise those options and choices, and we see more creative ways for kids to learn during their K-12 years, it's going to really encourage others to follow suit and be a part of the momentum.
Yeah, well, so let's build that momentum for a second. I know if there's one thing that I can ask you about that you'll be proud to talk about, it's your grandchildren. And your grandchildren are living examples of how people are finding those new ways to get an education. Not everybody who's going to be watching or listening to this podcast has experienced what you've experienced. Could you maybe tell a story or two of what you've seen in terms of these new ways of education, Betsy?
Sure. Well, as you well know, the school that several of my grandchildren are attending now is very much a student-directed learning environment. By that I mean the kids really do drive the agenda and the show to a large extent, and there aren't teachers, there are guides. So guides are there to only reflect and pose questions back to kids who set their own weekly learning goals and then help hold each other accountable to those goals. And one of the things that I've been able to see firsthand over a period of years with them is an annual children's business fair where each of them has started a small enterprise that they have to go and, first of all, decide what product or service they're going to offer, do some market research to decide and determine whether that's really a viable and good idea. They have to go and make their product. They have to price their product. They have to merchandise and market their product. And this all comes together on a Saturday morning with several hundred other kids under a big, huge tent. And you can be sure there's lots and lots of grandparents there checking out and buying all kinds of things that they might need, but many things they probably don't need. But the experience that they gain through that is just invaluable. And the confidence that they build through that and through their really student-directed learning environment, it's a joy to interact with my grandkids that are they're flourishing as a result of this opportunity.
Fabulous. I can't help but think of my 11-year-old daughter, Sophia, when you tell that story, Betsy. I was with her recently with a bunch of adults. And I have 4 kids just like you do. Like, I can't keep everything straight. So I asked Sophia a question because I didn't know the answer. I said, Sophia, you're 11. You go to a school like that, that you were describing, Betsy. I said, Sophia, how many businesses have you started? And she gets one hand and then she gets the other hand and she starts counting on her 2 hands. She's like, 6. And the adults that she was surrounded by were just gobsmacked by that. Who's ever met an 11-year-old who's a 6-time entrepreneur? But that's what you're talking about. That's the kind of experience that children can have in these new models of education. And oh, by the way, I was at a town hall meeting recently with some lawmakers who were criticizing the education savings account proposal that our governor, Democratic Governor Josh Shapiro, endorsed here in Pennsylvania. That would be about a $10,000 scholarship to go to whatever school they wanted. And because they're used to the government system, they were saying $10,000 is not that much money. Some of our public schools spend $20,000 or $30,000, and then they found out that my wife and I started school, and I was starting to describe what I just described to you about what the kids are happening and what you said about your grandkids. And I said, "Guess what, gentlemen? How much do you think it costs? $5,000 per year per student. You can get those kind of results that you're describing for way less money by changing the system. That's what we're about, I think." Now, you've been in this fight for so long, but something that not a lot of people saw coming is that alongside us and our listeners in this trench, Betsy, this year would arrive Jay-Z. It's been written up in newspapers across the country. In fact, one of your colleagues texted me about it when it came out that Jay-Z was joining the fight for Lifeline scholarships, as we call them here in Pennsylvania. Could you ever have imagined a prominent rapper coming into this fight? How do you feel about this?
That's terrific. And it's important because it's a whole nother perspective that will bring fresh conversation around why these ESAs and these policies are an imperative for all families. And I hope that he is the first of many more to join him in supporting these issues, these policies, in whatever state they might spend most of their time. But it's terrific. It's a great development, and I couldn't be more excited for you in Pennsylvania.
I hope there's many more like Jay-Z, and it's been amazing to see the way it's just electrified the issue since he joined the fight. So we're all thankful for him. Betsy, I just want to ask you one more question, and that's this. You and Dick are pioneers of the fight for education freedom, and you know better than most of it. So it's a long fight. You mentioned earlier that you've been in it for 35 years. Your listeners in Pennsylvania right now, they're in the thick of the fight. It's been a long fight to get these Lifeline scholarships and to make Pennsylvania the next state to pass education savings accounts and really join the education freedom revolution. What's your parting encouragement to your listeners?
Keep up the fight and continue to see it through to the actual passing of policy, and then help make sure that families and kids have great options to choose and to opt into as a result of these policies. Because the policy is not the end, it's the beginning. And I think we all need to look at it that way. Where we've been working so hard to the end of getting policies passed, but they really signify a beginning of something new and fresh and creative and excellent. We want excellence. We want reward. We want kids to flourish as a result.
Amen. It's not just a policy fight. It's an education revolution, and we're not just here to pass laws. We are here for human flourishing. I love hearing that, and I love also seeing you and your family live it out, Betsy. Thank you so much for being my guest today on School Choice Report, and thank you for all that you do.
Thank you, Charles, for everything you do, and I look forward to what's next in Pennsylvania.
Join us for the victory party, please.
I will.